How do? My name is Andrew Hancock and I am a VMware technical architect from Yorkshire in the United Kingdom. I have worked with VMware since their birth in 1998, so that has been over 24 years I have been working with the VMware product catalogue. Some of my close colleagues say if you cut Andy in half, it reads VMware like a stick of rock from Blackpool. I have now written 134 articles and recorded 30 hours of VMware vSphere videos for Experts Exchange and received 40 Experts Exchange awards over the last 10 years working with the Experts Exchange community. I am currently the overall #1 point earner in the Hall of Fame at Experts Exchange. I am honoured to have been accepted into the VMware vExpert program since 2011 and more recently made a VMware vExpert Pro for the last 3 years. Hi there and welcome back to another Hancock's VMware half hour. Okay, it's taken us 10 parts if you've been following this series to get to how to create your first Windows virtual machine on VMware vSphere 8, ESXi 8 host server. And I've done a video before for VMware vSphere Hypervisor 7, and I also wrote an article. This is going to be slightly different because we're going to be trying Windows 11 today, and we're going to be using VMware vCenter Server 8 to deploy this, and we're going to be using a virtual TPM device in the virtual machine to support the requirements of Windows 11. And in previous videos, I've showed you what happens if you don't have a TPM. I've showed you how to create a cluster because we need the cluster function to be able to support the native key provider to create our virtual machine. So without further ado, I'm just going to quickly show you that we do have our key provider. Our native key provider is all up and running. So there's nothing more for me to do than to actually basically start jumping in and looking at the wizard. So right click the host and I'm going to click new virtual machine, or I could right click the cluster and I could click new virtual machine, or I could right click the data center and click new virtual machine. So let's just right click the cluster and say new virtual machine, create a new virtual machine. So normally I would probably type, I think, my first virtual machine. If you've looked at the other videos and articles that I've done, I'm just going to call this Windows 11. And I'm going to select the data center and I'm going to select the cluster. Now, if we had DRS running, DRS would kick in and it would actually work out where the best place to actually basically put that virtual machine. We don't currently have DRS enabled at the moment. So ESXi 001, okay, the compatibility check's okay, but I know previously that memory is a bit tight on that server. So we've got no virtual machines running on ESXi 002 currently. So I'm going to use ESXi 002. Followed by next, I'm going to use the local data store on ESXi _local _vmfs 6, and I'm going to click next. I'm going to use the hardware version 20, which is ESXi 8 and later. I'm not going to share this with or vMotion this to any other virtual machine, but in fact maybe I will. Maybe what I'll do is I'll say that we want to use ESXi 7.0 U2 and later, and then later on we can actually move this between our other lab and this lab. If I was on 8 or later, then we wouldn't be able to move that virtual machine without changing the virtual machine hardware version by using something like VMware Converter. So let's actually say 7.0 U2 and later, followed by next. Now, just going back to that, all changing the hardware version does is give you more devices that are supported by that hardware version. And if I will try and find a link and put it in the description that breaks down and shows you what different virtual devices are available in the different hardware versions. So if you don't need to use a particular device in a virtual machine, then there probably isn't really a reason to use a particular hardware version. But to move between versions of ESXi, and you can see them all listed here, then we're going to use 7.02 and later, because we're going to move this back and forth to our other lab, which is based on ESXi vSphere 7. So followed by next. So the guest OS is Windows, and I'm going to choose Windows 11. And you may notice that Windows 11 is not actually listed for 7. So if we just select that and go back, now 11 appears. Now, people have asked before on Experts Exchange and sort of kind of said, well, I don't have an option for the guest OS version. How do I install the operating system? Choose the next best operating system that matches. All this really does is, some people use the word template, and I don't like using that word. This just does a best guess match for the virtual hardware that's required in the VM. So for instance, size of disk, network interface, the supported storage controller that it tries to match. And it's rather dumb, because we could select Microsoft Windows 10, but we could still install Windows 11, providing that we meet the requirements. So let's say Windows 11. We need to enable Windows-based virtual security. So I'm going to click tick, and I'm going to click next. And you will notice that what I'm talking about here is the customized hardware, the configure the virtual machine hardware. This virtual machine hardware is what is dictated by selecting that guest OS specification. So it pre-guesses that we want to use 2 CPU, 8 gig of memory, 96 gig hard drive. And if I just go back and change that to Windows 10, then we might subtly see a difference. So can you actually see here that it's suggesting that we use 48 gig minimum, rather than before it said 96. And it's dropped the TPM requirement. You notice here that there's no TPM requirement now that it's pulled in, but we can still add a TPM here if we wanted to. So if we go back here and select Windows 11, so 2 CPUs, 8 gig, 96 hard disk, it's actually given us the security device here, a SATA controller. But that probably isn't really any different than if we chose Windows 10 and we said that we wanted to do 96 gig and we wanted to add a TPM device there. I think what I'm trying to say is really that it's not going to prevent the operating system from booting or working. So I'm just going to go back, and I'm just going to go and select Windows 11. But I think what I'm going to do for shits and giggles here, but let's prove this. So I'm going to choose Windows 10. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop back here, because let's make this an ESXi 7.0 U2 and later. ESXi 7 U2 and later and vSphere 7.0 U2 and later does actually provide the key provider. So now, of course, we don't have a Windows 11 option, but I'm going to basically say, well, okay, Windows 10, 64-bit, enable Windows virtual base security, followed by next. I need to have a TPM device in here. If I don't have the TPM device, it's not going to satisfy those Windows 11 requirements. I'm going to change this to 96 gig. Okay. And one of the other things that we have to do is we have to add the ISO. And of course, the ISO we uploaded in one of the previous videos, 2 or 3 videos back, when I showed you how to upload ISOs and do the whole MD5 jiggery pokery. So selected, and I'm going to say connect at power on, followed by next. So I'm just going to have a quick recap. Windows 11, it's the host, data store, VM version 19, Microsoft Windows 10, enabled, 2 CPUs, 4 gig of memory present. Let's just change the memory. I think I noticed that it said it wanted 8 gig previously. So 2 CPUs, 8 gig, trusted platform module, NIC type 1000E. Now, this is a question that we get a lot, where people basically have created virtual machines using the default template. Don't like that word. And the reason it uses an E1000E is because Microsoft currently does not include the VMX Net3 driver in the installation media. They do provide it as a Windows update, which is surprising. And maybe one day we may actually start to see the VMX Net3 driver included in the installation media, but currently it's not in the installation media. So if you actually select VMX Net3, you'll find that you build an operating system that has no network interface. The E1000E interface is an emulated interface and should not really be used in production long term. Once you've built your virtual machine and you've started your virtual machine, remove that interface and add the VMX Net3 driver. However, you must have VMware tools installed because that contains the driver. Many networking issues are solved in using the fully virtualized VMX Net3 driver. And once you've built your golden master template once, and you've swapped out that NIC and you're using the VMX Net3 driver, there's no reason anymore to be doing and installing from the ISO. So I'm going to click finish. And there's our Windows 11 machine. So I'm going to power on. And I have to be a little bit quick because, yeah, I missed it. You will find that the very first time that it boots, it will actually basically turn around and ask you, do you want to hit enter to boot from the DVD? And I missed it. So I'm just going to basically hit send Control Alt Delete, and I'm going to hit enter again. And there we go. We're starting the boot. Now, this process is not really any different to installing Windows 11, Windows 10, or any other Windows operating system really on a physical computer. And in fact, recently, not that I do this a lot installing on physical computers these days, and it's not that I do this a lot either, because a lot of the installations of Windows and Linux that we do here are scripted, or they're done through PXE, or they're deployed via templates or SCCM or Chief, Puppet, Ansible, etc. All these other smart methods of deploying operating systems quickly. So you would have seen this before, I'm sure. So we're going to select for me, United Kingdom, language to install. Okay, and I'm going to click next. And I'm going to click install. Now it's shortly after the setup is starting that it's going to do these prerequisite checks to see whether or not that it meets the TPM requirement and it meets the CPU requirement, which of course has all changed in VMware vSphere. No need to activate at the moment or enter a product key. And the product key does actually, when you enter a product key, it does work out what version it's installing. If you don't actually add a key, then you basically get a list like this. So I'm going to turn around and say, well, we're going to do Windows 11 Pro, and I'm going to click next. Now it's at this point here normally that it's doing this check to see whether or not that it meets the vTPM requirement, and it meets the memory requirement, and it also basically meets the disk space requirement, and the memory requirement, the CPU requirement. So yes, I accept the terms of the license agreement, followed by next. I'm going to do a custom Windows install only, and there's my blank unallocated space, and I'm going to click next, and it's basically going to start doing the data copy from the DVD ISO into the VM. So I'm just going to let that continue. But there's one thing I wanted to show you. If we go back to our Windows 11 virtual machine that we've created, and you will notice here that it actually says that it's encrypted with a native key provider. So this is our key provider that it's talking to. It's talking to the EE Lab key provider, which is part of our vCenter Server 8. And without that key provider, we wouldn't be able to create this virtual machine. And if we actually look at the disk settings, then it will also turn around and say, if we look at the hard disk, usually somewhere it actually says that the disk is encrypted as well. And I'm trying to find where that is. Usually I see it. I'll dig that out later when I come back. Anyway, so nothing more for me to do at the moment. And I will speed all this up in post. So you can, I'll come back shortly after this completes, and we'll just summarize. So I'm going to bob off, and I will be back shortly. Okay, and welcome back. That took a little bit longer than I thought it would. But as I said, I don't really install ISOs or operating systems from scratch a lot anymore. Okay, so the country and region, yes, United Kingdom. And I did actually look for why it didn't actually say the virtual machine files are not encrypted, because the actual policy that's defined for the data store does not actually encrypt the configuration files and the virtual machine disk. So that's why I wasn't actually basically saying it. Okay, so it's taking a while here. Spinny disk, or spinning circle, and all I've done is actually basically just select okay, we're getting somewhere. Okay, so is this the right keyboard layout? No, it's not. We're using United Kingdom, so let's just say yes. I don't want to add a second keyboard. No. I think the memory and the CPU requirements might have been just although we were going with the custom specification or the template as suggested, we didn't change that. We didn't change the CPUs. We increased the memory. We increased the storage space. But it does actually go to show in this particular example that, we're using a Windows 10 template, if that's what you want to call it. If we just go back to edit settings here and we look at the VM options, Windows 11 is the name. Boot options, of course, are ESXi, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to use the TPM. The guest OS version, Microsoft Windows 10 64-bit. So just goes to show that, you know, if we actually use a different guest OS version, that doesn't actually prevent the guest OS from running. So okay, so we're going to name the device. So I'm going to call this Windows 11. I'm going to call it EE Windows 11, and I'm going to say next. And it's going to ask just a moment. I'm going to disappear. I'll be back shortly. Okay, I'm back. I think this virtual machine is struggling a bit with the number of vCPUs that we've given it. We specified so again we went by the 2. We actually went by the template. I'm sure we did, unless I missed it, and it should have been 4. Tell you what I'm going to do, just for shits and giggles. I'm just going to go back and we're just going to do create new virtual machine. I'm just going to go new virtual machine, EE cluster. Okay, yeah, let's pop that one. Just interesting to see whether or not the number of vCPUs that were recommended in the template. No, 2, still 2. Yeah, just seems to be struggling a bit CPU wise. I would have thought maybe 4, although that is 2 silent power on. Yeah, just seems underpowered to me. CPU topology assigned at power on. Okay, I was just looking at performance before. If we look at monitor and we look at overview, and we can see here that, you know, this machine is really struggling for CPU. First time I've run Windows 11 on these Gen 8s. I've got Windows 11 running in the other lab, and I've got Windows 11 running in production on smaller hosts. So it's a puzzle. I might actually tweak it. It just you get a sort of kind of feeling in your water, in your gut, that things are just a bit sluggish, a bit like treacle. It's running a bit slow. Anyway, okay, so I'm going to set up for work or school, which will allow me to do a domain join or specify my own local user account rather than actually using Windows Live or whatever they call it these days. So I'm going to click sign in options, and I'm going to click domain join instead, but I'm not going to do a domain join. I'm actually going to specify a local administrator. So my name, Andrew Hancock. I have actually used I think EE in the past, and I completely forgot what the password was. So I'm just going to go with a bog standard password that I can remember. And then I'm going to answer some security questions. So what's my first pet's name? And I've got to be a bit careful here not to actually basically give away too much about my security. So let's just turn around and say my first pet name was Squeak, which it was a guinea pig, but I don't actually basically use that as one of my first pet names. Security question. So, what's the first name of your oldest cousin? I know, I'll go with Bob. I don't have a cousin called Bob. Just in case you think I have a cousin called Bob. And what was the first school that I know what was your childhood nickname? I know, let's go with Mr. VMware. Not that VMware was around when I was a child. And we'll click next. Not that I really need to actually basically need these security questions in the but just to show you, really, if you've not seen a Windows 11 install, I'm sure you have. Really, just to get to the point where we get a desktop and you can see the lovely shiny Windows 11 desktop. Yes, it's lovely. Personally, at the moment, I don't have any Windows 11 physical devices. I've held off for the moment. Personally, I'm not a fan. So yes, I'm going to accept that. Yes, find my device. Yes, do that. Yes, do this. Yes, do that. We want a tailored experience. Yes, do that. These are very, very similar to Windows 10 later features that I've seen. And we'll just get to the point whereby we see a desktop fire up for the very first time, and then we'll call it a day. So in summary, what have we been doing in this? So we're using the Windows 11 ISO to deploy and install Windows 11. You've seen me in a future video actually enable SSH so we could log into the server to basically upload an ISO via the vSphere client directly attached to the host or via vCenter server. You saw me use MD5 sum to do and check the MD5 signatures in a previous video. Then moving on, I showed you the need to use a trusted platform module as a requirement in the virtual machine. If you don't use a virtual TPM device, you don't meet the requirements for Windows 11 to install it. And I know that there is actually a workaround to do that. I'll put that in the description so you can have a little look at that. We had to create a native key provider in VMware vSphere 8, vCenter Server 8. Unfortunately, that's not available on a standalone ESXi host. And you've seen me create a cluster and add our 2 hosts and lab into the cluster so that we can actually use the native key provider function to allow us to meet the requirements to install Windows 11. So there's quite a lot there. In the last 5 videos, I think this is probably part 10, I think. And just while we're waiting a few minutes, and don't turn off your PC, I meant to do this a while ago to shout out to a good friend of mine called Edward Richmond, that is actually basically creating a not-for-profit community business in Hull called the Cod Head Club. And this is his awesome resources list. And you will see that I star here, Andrew Hancock, and you can find this is on GitHub, so you can find every single article that I have written for Experts Exchange in this list, currently 134 something, and then you can see all the Hancock's VMware half-hour how-to series, all 35 of them, that are also hosted at Experts Exchange. And of course, from the 11th of October 2022, VMware released VMware vSphere 8. And so far, there are 6 parts available that are added. And I actually basically update this list as articles and videos are published on Experts Exchange. So, if you're wanting a quick go-to to where to find my articles, or even, say, if you are based in the UK, then have a little look at the Cod Head Club and its mission and its statements at what they're trying to do in Hull as serving the community. As I said, it's a not-for-profit organization at delivering resources to the community in Hull. So I'll put this bookmark in the description as well, so you can have a look at what Edward's doing, and you can also basically have a little look at as it's a go-to list of where I've basically listed all my articles and videos. If you need to find them very, very easily, and have a little look at all the parts so far that we've done in this VMware vSphere 8 series. And hopefully we can go back to Windows 11, and it's still telling me that good things are coming your way. And looking at my Stream Deck, it's telling me that it's 28 days until Christmas. So we've got 1 month to go before Christmas. And I was sort of kind of thinking, you know, about Christmas this year, and maybe doing a VMware Advent-based theme of maybe doing a video once a day for the 25 days lead up to Christmas. That might be, we'll see. You know, I'm not going to make any promises. Not going to make any promises about that. But I say I do have some new fancy software now that does actually allow me to render the to cut, edit, produce, and render the videos much quicker to get them up to Experts Exchange. It used to take an age, but now I can offload all that to the lovely GPU, and the GPU will do all the transcoding. So do I have to keep on waffling, making sure everything is ready to go? Don't turn off your PC. I don't really know what this is actually doing. I don't know whether or not it's actually pulling down updates, or where it's just showing something lovely. But anyway, so I'm just going to bob off, and I'm going to come back and show you what the Windows 11 desktop looks like. So I'll be back shortly. Okay, so there we are. We have a Windows 11 desktop, and even though I've got a lovely GUI, I still want to get to command prompt and do stuff if I can type. This is a little bit sluggish for my liking. I think I'm going to go and have a little look and change some parameters in the CPUs and see whether or not we can get this running a little bit better. Okay, so thanks so much for watching. I'll put the links that I've spoken about in this video in the description for you to have a little look at. If you have got time, please go off and visit Edward Richmond's. I think I called him Edmund. I must have been thinking of Blackadder. Anyway, my apologies. So if you have got time, you know, please go off and have a little look at Edward's Hod Head Club and have a little look at the resources. And if you're certainly in the UK and you think that you know, you can bring something fantastic to the community in Hull, then please have a little look at what the Cod Head Club is doing. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. Come back in the next video where we start doing some funky things with Windows 2022, Windows 22 server. Anyway, all the best now, and thank you very much. Goodbye.